Hello everybody and welcome to the June edition of the Farmer Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Kopechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. Well, we're in a really busy time of the year. Everything is overlapping, things going on in every crop. So I just wanted to take some time this month to kind of update everyone on where we're at. I'll talk about most of our major crops and kind of where we're at and things we need to be considering this time of year as we go forward into June and on into early July. We'll start out with wheat, and not, again, as I always say, not a lot of wheat in this area, but wheat harvest has begun. We had all that wet weather. It was hard to harvest. The grains wouldn't dry out, but finally we got to the point last weekend. We're taping on the 16th of June. We finally got to the point over the past weekend where we got some wheat dry enough to harvest. So harvest has been going on. And surprisingly, some of the yields have been really good. Now, it's not overall, but I've talked to a couple of guys who have harvested some wheat in the 80s, and that's really, really exceptional wheat. It's not everywhere. That's on well-drained ground, on guys that use some pretty high management practices in their wheat production. So cutting some really good wheat. Now, we'll have some fields that don't drain well and that kind of thing that'll do good to cut half of that. But I am very pleased with some of those, again, high management yields, high management fields on this good ground cutting really well. Next, we'll move to corn. Where we're at with corn. Corn, we're nearing tasseling in a lot of cases. So we're getting close to that reproductive stage and where the corn will be tasseling, and then we'll start silking and making that ear, and those grains start filling out. So that's kind of where we're at with corn. Several things to consider at corn. One is nitrogen management. And as you can guess, with all the wet weather we've had with our corn, nitrogen applications use has not been as efficient maybe as we'd like, because we've been having to throw some of that corn on wet ground staying wet. Sometimes you got water standing in fields, so it's not the most efficient way to use nitrogen in our corn. So we've got some issues there, so we've got to think about that. I think the big thing is, most people have got to the point where they do the pre-tassel application of nitrogen. So, we're used to doing that, but I think it may be more important this year than ever, since maybe we haven't been as efficient as we would like to be earlier. And, we call it a pre-tassel application, but it doesn't have to be quite that tightly timed. I mean, you've got a window to do this, and, depending on when you got your big shot of nitrogen out there, you may still have a pretty good supply of nitrogen in the plant at pre-tassel. Maybe you can wait a little bit. It just depends on your situation. But the bottom line is research has shown that we can make significant yield increases with nitrogen in corn all the way up to the R2 stages, which is the stage when the little grains look like blisters on the ear. So we can put out nitrogen all the way to that point and still get significant returns from it. So it's not absolutely essential you get it pre-tassel, especially if you're still carrying over some of that early nitrogen. So, we've got some time to play with on that, but I definitely think we'll need, certainly people will need an extra shot of nitrogen or will want to, just because of the uncertainty of the efficiency. Irrigation is going to have to get going real quickly here. The plant's probably got a shallow root system, so we're going to need nitrogen pretty quickly, or irrigation pretty quickly, especially as we get into that reproductive stage. Fungicides, most people apply fungicides to their corn nowadays just as a protective manner and just as an automatic deal, to protect their crop. They've got a big investment in it and they want to get some yield increase or protect the yield they've got. Usually we want to make that application during the silking stage. Don't want to do anything before tasseling generally. After brown silk, a week or two after brown silk, you're getting a little bit late. So let's try to get that out during the silking stage if you're going to make a fungicide application and make that timely and useful. Next to soybeans. Big story, last thing I've been looking at here lately has been making decisions on replants for farmers. We had all that rain after several plantings, and so we've got a thin stand of beans in places. Trying to make decisions on replants. Kind of my rule of thumb, when I'd like to see at least 75 or 80,000 plants out there per acre, and you want them pretty consistently, and that's the thing we normally don't see. We see holes here and holes there, and not a consistent stand. But if we've got 70 to 80,000 plants and they're pretty consistent, this late in the season, I'd probably just stay with that. Now, if you've got holes out there, that's a different story. You may want to plant holes. There's some people that just will go out and plant the holes. They're fine with that. And some people, they don't want to do that. They want to replant the whole field. So that's kind of your personal preference. If I've got a big plant part of the field that's looking good on June 15th, I'm going to save it and maybe just replant the holes. So, and how do we figure this this plant population, there's really a couple of ways of doing it. If you've got broadcast beans or drill beans, we use a hula hoop, and people sometimes ask me what I'm carrying a hula hoop out in the soybean field for. That's how we can determine plant populations on those narrow row spacings or those broadcast situations. You can go to the internet and Google hula hoop method for soybean plant population. It can tell you how many plants you want to get inside a hula hoop depending on what the diameter of it is, and that'll help you determine, you know, how many plants you've got per acre. I've got one that's a 32-inch diameter, so every plant I find in there is the equivalent of 7,500 plants per acre. So you can use that. If you're on row beans, like 30-inch rows, then you need to measure out 17 feet 5 inches of row length and count the plants and multiply that times 1,000, and that'll tell you how many plants per acre you got. On these late plantings, stay with the Group 4 maturity soybeans. I think that's still where the yield's at. You know, we want a little shorter season when we get late as well, but you know, we used to always want to go to 5s at that point. Let's stay with the Group 4s. Let's put an inoculant seed treatment on the seed, excuse me. Research has really shown on June plantings about a 6 bushel increase, and on July plantings about 11 bushel increase. So we want to get that inoculant out there as a seed treatment on these beans for these later plantings. One thing I'm looking at right now is post-emerge weed control. You know, we've had all this wet weather. A lot of the weeds have gotten away, and we're trying to make applications this week of herbicides for our weeds in our soybeans. We got a lot of big weeds. We got a lot of big pig weeds. I've got one field of big smartweed, which I never dealt with this many smartweed in a soybean field. But what we're going to probably have to look at is make that application and be looking to see what kind of control you've got, and we're probably going to have to make some sequential applications to finish these weeds off. So that's soybeans. Next we'll move out to rice, and I'm in a rice field right now just south of Swifton. This field's looking really good. This is the full page 7321. It's looking very good. It's very clean, and all we've had out here weed control wise is a shot of Command and then a shot of Prowl and Facet. You know, I always talk about that overlapped application of herbicides for our rice crop, and it shows how well it's worked right here. Again, just Command followed by Prowl Facet, and we're pretty much as clean as you can get in this field, so it's looking really good out here. Things we're looking at in rice right now, we've got a variety of stages. We've got some rice that's not flooded up yet, and we've got some like this field here. The internodes are starting to move. We're between green ring and half inch, so you know, we're getting into that reproductive stage on some of this earlier rice. The things we're looking at right now are trying to get these fields cleaned up where there's weed issues, and also nitrogen management. As far as cleaning up, of course, our first priority is usually going to be barnyard grass, and hopefully, like this field, we've overlapped residuals and we've got a clean field as far as barnyard. But if you've got barnyard escapes and they're starting to get big, it's a crapshoot on what's going to work and what's not. You know, we have issues with hot temperatures. These herbicides don't work as well. Also, lower humidities. We don't get the contact and coverage that we would like. So a lot of issues with trying to apply post-emerge grass herbicides in these, you know, salvage situations. So it's, you know, again, it's a crapshoot. If you got to do something, you know, I look at several choices. A regiment's usually my go-to on bigger barnyard grass. It seems to do a good job, especially if you don't have ALS resistance. Now, if you've got ALS resistance, you're probably not going to get anything out of the regiment. But regiment's kind of my go-to. Clincher, sequential applications of clincher, higher rates of clincher. You know, sometimes they'll get you some suppression. It's usually about what you can expect out of that. A lot of people are you know, disappointed in clincher, but we never have used it right. But I think if we use it right, at least we can get some suppression in a lot of these situations. Rebel X, which is a combination of clincher and grass, also can be good in these salvage situations. So that's some of our choices. Again, don't hold your breath on any of these choices this late in these salvage situations. Black seeded weeds, our coffee bean, our indigo, or morning glory, we want to control those so we don't get docked at the elevator. 2,4-D is a great choice especially for the morning glory and the coffee bean. And also we've turned to 2,4-D in a lot of our flat sedge situations. It does a pretty good job if you missed the flat sedging with other possible controls. Then 2,4-D might be your option right there. So think about that. Also, I love propanil grandstand. It's good on all of the black seeded weeds, indigo, coffee bean, and morning glory, so that's a good choice right there. With these herbicides, especially with the 2,4-D, we got to make sure with the plant board it's legal through all the plant board regulations to apply it where we're at and in the situation we're in. And also, of course, be aware of your surrounding crops, because we don't want to damage other people's soybeans or other things as well. So be careful with those, but those are kind of go-to herbicides in these situations. Finally, nitrogen management. It's time for that mid-season application on the conventional varieties. Again, this is a hybrid here, so we're going to wait and make a boot shot on this. But with some of our conventional clear fields, with our Diamonds, Titans, Jupiters, and those kinds of varieties, we want to make that mid-season application. We want to wait. If you put a normal big shot of nitrogen out there on these varieties, then we want to wait at least 4 weeks before we put that mid-season application, provided we got efficient use of that big shot of nitrogen. And we started doing this a few years ago because what we've learned is that that plant is still taking up that pre-flood nitrogen as much as 4 weeks into that application. So we've got to just wait till it's used up before we apply any more. Otherwise, that mid-season shot may be wasted. So we want to wait at least 4 weeks. Make sure that joint's moving. We're at least at a green ring to 1/2 inch before we make that mid-season application. So that's kind of where we're at with our crops at this point. Again, we've covered wheat, corn, soybeans, and rice, and the crop's starting to shape up pretty well for all we've been through. I'm pretty happy with the way things are starting to shape up. Sunshine and warm temperatures make all the difference in the world on a lot of these things. So we're shaping up, and hopefully when I get back to you in July, we'll be looking at a really good crop that's all in the reproductive stage. This has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmers Supply Association report for June.